In this video lesson, we explore the development of the Constitution and the compromises that were developed by the Constitutional Convention. Sensing another impending crisis, another meeting was scheduled for Philadelphia in May of 1787. Alexander Hamilton of New York, pictured here, hoped the meeting would result in strengthening the government. Alexander Hamilton had been Washington's aide during the American Revolutionary War. Hamilton was a naturalized citizen who was born an illegitimate son of a poor mother in Barbados, and he cared deeply for the nation's future. He was also ambitious and brilliant. Hamilton was a self-made man who became a lawyer, married into a wealthy New York family, and won election to the Continental Congress for 2 years. In May of 1787, the Philadelphia Constitutional Convention convened to consider changes to the Articles of Confederation. Among the 55 delegates were Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, George Washington, Ben Franklin, Roger Sherman, William Patterson, Edmund Randolph, and George Mason. These were called the Federalists. Among those absent from the convention were some of the more rebellious leaders of the era, such as Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Sam Adams, and John Hancock, men who probably would have opposed the creation of a stronger central government. These people were called the Anti-Federalists. All of the 55 delegates to the Philadelphia Convention were well-to-do men, lawyers, merchants, shippers, land speculators, and moneylenders, none from the poorer debtor class. The convention delegates adopted a rule of secrecy to prevent speculation about their deliberations and to allow delegates to freely express opinions and explore solutions for the nation's problems. Almost immediately, this convention of demigods elected George Washington as their chairman and adopted rules of procedure. Virginia's delegates proposed scrapping the Articles and drafting an entirely new constitution, a motion adopted by the convention without consulting the states. The Virginia Plan, which is also called the Large State Plan, which was largely the work of James Madison, proposed a three-branch government composed of a bicameral legislature, a powerful executive, and a judiciary. Other elements of the Virginia Plan included representation in both houses of Congress to be based on a state's population, giving the executive and judicial branches the power to veto state laws in conflict with federal law, and giving the federal government the power to force states to obey federal law and the new Constitution, a plan that repudiated the principle of Confederation in favor of federalism. The New Jersey Plan, which is also called the Small State Plan, proposed a unicameral Congress with equal representation regardless of a state's size or population, a plural executive of up to 3 men elected by Congress from among its members, and giving Congress the power to tax. Heated debate over the two plans and the issue of representation ensued, to the point the convention almost dissolved. In July of 1787, Roger Sherman of Connecticut proposed the Great Compromise, a compromise that merged the two plans into the basic structure of the emerging United States. The compromise proposed a bicameral legislature with a House of Representatives whose elected membership would be determined by population, and the Senate with equal representation for every state. So they had 2 senators per state and a single Supreme Tribunal. Debate continued over the concept because representation in the House, because if slaves counted, it would add the tax burden to slave states. Or if slaves counted, it would enable southern states to elect more representatives, putting the northern states at a political disadvantage. The 3/5 compromise solved the debate over slaves and counting slaves in representation and for taxation. Basically, 3/5 of all of the slaves would form the numerical basis for the apportionment of House of Representatives. So 3 out of every 5 slaves was counted for both representation and population. Before Southern states agreed to giving Congress power of the commerce, they insisted on additional protections. Protections took the form of the Commerce and Slave Trade Compromise, under which Congress was forbidden to tax imports from any state and to act on the slave trade for a period of at least 20 years, or to interfere with the migration or importation of such persons as any state now existing shall think proper to admit, except for a small head tax. Basically, the Commerce and Slave Compromise prevented Congress from interfering in the slave trade for 20 years. Delegates to the Philadelphia Convention made a distinction between democracy and republicanism, favoring republican institutions by giving a direct voice to the people through the House of Representatives, but checking that voice through the Senate, which was a body of men elected by state legislatures and not by popular vote. Similarly, the executive was protected from the excesses of direct democracy by an electoral college, whose only function was to elect the president and the vice president. The Electoral College consists of electors chosen by each state's legislature, whose number equaled the total sum of representatives and the senators from each state. Each state's current electoral votes can be seen here. Thus, the executive would owe his office to a temporary assemblage of leading citizens who could use their own judgment in voting for candidates, an executive not directly obliged to the Congress, the people, or the states. Thus, the executive would owe his office to a temporary assemblage of leading citizens who could use their own judgment in voting for the candidates. The federal Constitution listed the powers of the president basically to initiate policy, propose legislation, veto acts of Congress, command the military, conduct foreign policy, and appoint the judiciary, and he was subject to checks and balances. Congress was given powers to make all laws which are necessary and proper for carrying out its powers to tax, regulate trade, coin money, raise an army and a navy, etc. We'll explore the compromises at the Constitutional Convention in more detail in class.